Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon with us. It's not the morning, it's the afternoon. My name is Katie Earl. I'm the coordinator of the University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. And we're joined here virtually today with Miranda McCoy from BlueCross BlueShield. I'm very excited to have her again back with us. And just happy to have all of you here too. This is wonderful, such an important topic, especially right now. So we'll let you know some housekeeping things. As you heard, we are recording the session, and I'll try to post it online at a later date. And for those of you who are new to us today, you have joined without a video of yourself showing and you're muted. It's not because you've done anything wrong, it's just our settings. And as you've heard, there are also other people in here, but you just think you're the only one. Promise you, you're not. So thank you. We'll be communicating with you through the Q&A panel. So if you have any questions or comments, type those in, and Miranda's going to be tossing out some things for you to think about, so you can type in those answers as well, and we'll go through them. So when you join today, chances are your Q&A panel popped up on the right side of your screen. You may just have to expand it, then you'll see your text box. Type in your questions and comments right there for us. A little feedback. Okay. If you don't see that on your screen, if you look at the lower right-hand side, you'll see a little half circle with a square and a question mark. Click on that. Or if you're on a tablet and smartphone, touch or poke your screen, your control panel will come up. You'll see a circle with 3 dots, and then you'll have it. So we hope you find it. We hope you participate. So we want to thank the sponsors of our program, which is my Department of Senior Services, BlueCross BlueShield of Western New York, Celsius Orthopedics and Wegmans for all they do to help make this program possible. And we want you to know that you can always call Senior Services if you have any questions about program services or benefits for yourself or a loved one. We're happy to help however we can. 858-8526. On to Miranda. Miranda McCoy is a certified health coach with BlueCross BlueShield of Western New York. She has an undergraduate degree in biochemistry from Canisius College, is in the process of completing her master's degree in health and human performance with a specialty in strength and conditioning. Miranda has done presentations with our program for about 3 years and really enjoys working with the community, and I will turn it over. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everybody. I know we're virtual again today, but I'm so happy to have you with us to kind of learn about this topic. I know that especially this year alone, it's become a very interested topic and definitely can help out with a lot of the things that we've all been going through this year. So I hope that you guys take a little bit from it, are able to kind of utilize what you've learned and bring it to your everyday lives kind of from here on out. So without further ado, I will get started. So as Katie said, my name is Miranda McCoy. I work at BlueCross BlueShield. I'm one of the health coaches. I've been doing health coaching for about 4 years. I have some experience with mostly scientific background. So one of the things about this presentation is it's not something that I've actually learned from the classroom per se, but more from life experiences and kind of my own day-to-day life, and really kind of taken some initiatives in other people giving suggestions and kind of giving some recommendations on this topic as well. So I hope you guys find it to be helpful. As Katie had said, I will be kind of doing and throwing out some thought processes throughout the presentation. So you are more than welcome, if you guys have a pen and paper available at home and you're ready to write stuff down, if you want to use that Q&A box to jot some thoughts down as well. We'll kind of have a little bit of group participation just to kind of get some ideas about self-talk, kind of what we use every day, how to improve on that. So what we're going to kind of focus on today is going to be the definition of self-talk. So what is it? Kind of where did it come from? We're going to look a little bit into the thought cycle. I'll show you a kind of visual for it. It's very interesting, and you'll maybe look at it and be able to apply it to some everyday examples that you have. We're going to look through positive versus negative self-talk, kind of where they come from, what some examples are of that positive versus negative self-talk so we can recognize it in our own life. Then we'll look at some triggers, changing our wiring, kind of looking at how we do that self-talk, how we change it from negative to positive, kind of that aspect of ditching the negative per se. And then we'll end with a little bit of mantras, intentions, kind of again, working on that self-perspective positivity towards the end as well. So what is self-talk? It's something that you may have heard of before. Some people may have kind of brought it up or even just stated the way that you're talking to yourself, which is the simple definition for it. So it's the way that you talk to yourself. So it's not something that can be found in the dictionary, but it is something that we can utilize to either build ourselves up or break ourselves down. And you might already be thinking of some of those examples that you have for yourself on a day-to-day basis. Self-talk can be used silently, something we just kind of use in our head, even out loud, something that we say to ourselves during our different situations in the day-to-day basis. And it actually can affect and frame our reactions, not only to ourselves, but also to others and different aspects of our lives. So we really want to focus on how can we bring that from the negative and switch it over to the positive. So it's something that also can be very subtle and quick. We might not even realize, if we're not thinking about it, how we're talking to ourselves on a day-to-day basis. We might not be sure that even the things that we're saying could be negative or positive until we start to break these things down. And that's what I want to focus on today, is really looking at how are we talking to ourselves every day? How is that affecting us in our emotions and our reactions? And how can we change that? So self-talk is a big factor in what you think about yourself and who you are, kind of what your personality is, some characteristics. And then there's actually been shown to be a positive correlation between self-talk and self-esteem. It might also be something that you've heard referred to as your inner voice. Again, something that can be in your head or out loud as well, but something that we utilize just for ourselves. So this is that thought cycle that I had mentioned in our overview. So what it is we have a thought. It could be a negative thought, could be a positive thought, and it leads us to feel a certain way. So it leads us to certain emotions. So our emotions, or how we feel, normally dictate our actions or our behaviors, how we react to situations. And in turn, those actions that we take or those behaviors that we show lead us to some sort of an outcome. So again, if we think of maybe some just examples on a personal basis of how maybe a negative thought would go through this cycle, what sort of negative thoughts lead us to mostly negative emotions, that leads us to maybe unwanted behaviors and unwanted outcomes, then we can take a look at the positive and say, okay, a positive thought produces what emotion? Usually happiness, joy, lots of those things. And those joy and happiness emotions lead us to, more wanted behaviors and outcomes. So in turn, we can say that the thoughts that we have on a day-to-day basis are part of the reason that maybe we have some outcomes that we do in life. And we really, again, want to take a look at how can we make those positive thoughts to turn into some good positive outcomes. So this is something that if you guys want to use that Q&A bar and kind of maybe type in some examples to these questions or some answers. So some comparisons. What are some things that we do to build stronger muscles? What do we do to create a good foundation for a house? What are some ideas that you guys might have that would fall into that? So building stronger muscles and creating a good foundation for a house. There are many different answers that you can put, and all of them probably would be able to kind of flow into the example that we have, which is awesome.
We're having a couple things actually, Miranda. So far we have practice self-love, and then we have be kind to yourself.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so those are really good things that we can do for that last question there. So what should we do to build a stronger self-image? So self-love, having that positive outlook, those are really great things. So working back to the building stronger muscles and creating a good foundation. So in building stronger muscles, we need to exercise. We need to do those things more than just once. If we go out and we go for a walk one day out of the month, or if we go to the gym and lift one weight out of the month, is that really going to help us build stronger muscles? Unfortunately, probably not. although we wish it would. So the same kind of things that we want to put into place for building a stronger self-image is that idea of practicing, or that idea of consistency. If we work on that positive self-talk once in a while, it's going to be very difficult to see any sort of progress and to really put focus on it and see some sort of positive results from it. So again, it's something that we want to try and be aware and conscious of, just like we are with how much we're exercising, how much we're eating, how we're, treating family, being kind to others, just having that awareness and consciousness around the situation of how we talk to ourselves on a day-to-day basis. So negative versus positive self-talk, we're going to talk a little bit about what the differences are. Then we're going to go into specifics of negative and positive so we can really recognize our own negative and positive self-talk and what we relate to the most, because then we can take it to the next step and start to reassess those and change them a little bit. So for negative self-talk on the left here, these are things that are going to be more things related to your inner critic. A lot of these phrases are more demeaning, they're labeling, hurtful. Most of the time they are false and they're not even true, so we shouldn't be saying them anyway, unfortunately. These may come from different events or people in your life, and these negative self-talk aspects can lead to a lack of motivation. It's found to lead into certain mental and emotional aspects like depression and increased stress as well. Looking on the other end with the positive self-talk, these are going to be phrases that lead more, and we see more in the aspects of encouraging. So it's called our inner encourager. They're going to be uplifting, motivating, more challenging maybe, in a positive way, confident, optimistic, any sort of those characteristics that you can attribute to what you think of to be positive. This type of self-talk also may come from different people or events in your life, and can actually lead to increased self-confidence, more happiness, a better outlook on life in general, and essentially a fuller life. A lot of people have said when they kind of take that switch from negative to positive. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into both sides. Then we want to identify what we use in our everyday life. So one of the things that just popped up before I switch is, unfortunately, you see under the negative self-talk that more than 3/4 of what we say to ourselves generally falls within this category. So this is something where we definitely need to take a step back, figure out how we talk to ourselves, and figure out how we can change that and really put some effort in there. So some types of negative self-talk, just so it's something that you can start to maybe recognize where you fit here, or where maybe most of your self-talk comes from. So the first one here is the worrier. So this tends to create anxiety, maybe aspects of overreaction. Generally starts with things of what if. Well, what if my car breaks down? What if I don't make it on time? What if this and that? And those are things that, again, kind of create that negative self-talk, which leads to us feeling more anxious, more depressed, more stressed, a lot of those things that we want to try and stay away from. Another negative self-talk type is going to be the critic. This is more revolving around judging and evaluating. So I am, and then it's usually paired, unfortunately, with some sort of a negative characteristic, or why can't I just, fill in the blank there. So a lot of these things create that labeling, and a lot of these things with the critic, again, fall under that falsehood or things that are not true. We also have the perfectionist under the negative self-talk types. So the perfectionist is one that is pushing, never satisfied, usually under chronic stress. Phrases like I should, or I have to, or I must, making sure that there's no other option, but this thing has to get done, whatever it is. And then another one is going to be underneath the aspect of like the victim. So promoting depression or hopelessness. So phrases like I can't, I never, I've tried, but, and I want you, as we kind of go through these aspects, just to kind of start to think, what are some phrases you feel like you use, or do you recognize the use of these sentences in your everyday life too, the way that you talk to yourself? Some aspects of the positive self-talk. So first one you see here is going to be the motivator. So these are phrases that use to encourage, push in a positive direction. And that's I can, I can accomplish this, or I can do that. I can make it on time, kind of use any phrase that you normally put in there. The proclaimer. So the proclaimer under the positive self-talk is one of declaration, positive reinforcement. So this one looks similar to one of the ones that we just saw under the negative side of I am or I know, but we pair these with positive endings. So I am strong, or I am smart, or et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be more of that proclamation under that positive self-talk. The realist also falls under positivity as well. This is one of our self-talk aspects where we have more acceptance, understanding. It helps us to move forward from a situation. So I accept blank and I blank, or I always do this, but I will do this next time. Something where you have that basis of understanding for yourself and what happened, and then you can move forward and recognize what you can do in the future. So what does your self-talk look like? So I want you to take just a minute or two, either if you want to use that Q&A bar. I would like, if you are willing to and want to participate, put in some different answers to there just so we can kind of go through and review them. But I want you guys to think of what we have kind of gone through with what self-talk is, and look back even just today. It's something that we do on an hourly basis, on a half-hourly basis. We're always doing something when we're moving along our day where we're talking to ourselves in some manner. So if you can take just a minute and think about what you say to yourself on a day-to-day basis, any of those phrases that come to mind, positive or negative. Think of examples for when something goes wrong, maybe examples when something goes right. When you're thinking about changing something in your life, what are some things that you say to yourself? What do you say in your head? What do you say out loud? They can kind of fall in any sort of those aspects. So I'm going to give you just a minute to go through that. If you have your pen and paper at home and want to jot down some ideas, maybe put one in the Q&A bar just so Katie and I can go through and maybe have some participant examples. That would be awesome.
Having a couple things. I can get through this COVID craziness.
Okay, perfect example for now. That's awesome.
And I'm also seeing lots of simultaneous positive and negative messages.
Okay.
And then we have somebody who starts their phrases with I always. And somebody who says I am not smart enough.
Okay. Okay, so definitely a lot of different examples that we've seen there just from, everybody that's here. So some positives of using those statements of I can. Love the aspect of, I can get through this COVID, I can get through the pandemic, we can even go further and you can even add things on, I can get through this by, and then using, whatever it is that's a stress management technique, an activity that you like, something along those lines. That leads us to more of that positive thinking. One thing you had mentioned, Katie, that somebody had said that I hear quite a lot was the aspect of I am not smart enough. So using that I am statement, but then kind of tagging that negative characteristic onto it. Now, something with that is, again, if we think of that kind of thought cycle, if we tell ourselves on a day-to-day basis that we're not smart enough, that leads us to feeling not smart enough, maybe feeling inferior to our peers, feeling like we can't participate in X, Y, or Z because of that. And that leads us to kind of stay away from those sort of things. We're keeping ourselves from different experiences, learning processes, etc. So we definitely want to take a look at how we can change those negatives into more positive thinking. But that's wonderful. Thank you guys for participating in that. That was wonderful. So the next one that we're going to go through is taking those phrases that you were thinking of and that you had written down. So what does your self-talk look like? And we're going to look at triggers. So this is really important when you're thinking about self-talk, because there's something that has happened, some reason why we go down that certain direction with our thoughts. So some examples of triggers. I really love this picture. I'm sure you guys have seen it before in some capacity, but it's this little kitten that looks in the mirror and he is a lion and he knows it. So he goes forth throughout the day and he is confident and he, walks with a strut and he just knows. So that's where we want to be. Now, unfortunately, sometimes we can feel like that and we have a lot of other things on our plate and in our timeline. So these triggers don't have to be just negative triggers. They can be positive triggers. And you see that in this slide. So we have things like stress. We have things like family, negative things like jealousy, depression, panic. You can also see things on the right there of meditation, calmness, thinking of those people, situations that keep you calm and kind of in that meditative state. So again, triggers can be positive or negative, just like our self-talk. So I want you to take a second and think of just the negative thoughts that you have maybe written down or that you've thought of, and write down some of those triggers that you think are associated with that, or with that, or that lead you to that negative self-talk. So as you guys are writing down, I'll give a couple maybe examples or things that where triggers come from. Are you saying negative things maybe about your personality, about your body, about your skills, about your personal characteristics? Do you only say negative things when certain people are around? Once you've identified some of those situations, we can kind of think about how we feel when we say those things to ourselves. So if you guys have a couple of maybe examples of where those triggers, those negative triggers are coming from, if you want to write a couple of those down, and then we can review those as well if you want to use that Q&A bar just to participate. I love having that as an option too. It's really great. You can still, I really love to be very interactive at my presentation. So this is very helpful to have that.
We have a couple of things so far. I see comparisons to others. I see certain people. COVID isolation is a trigger. Okay. I often feed off of negative news reports.
Okay. Perfect. No, those are wonderful examples and very, very common examples. So it's one of those things, you are definitely not alone in where those are coming from. So you had mentioned things like certain people, comparisons to other people. That's something I think that unfortunately is very, very prevalent in society, is the comparison between people. That one is definitely a challenging one, but one that we can get a hold of for sure. Being under isolation or the COVID isolation definitely is unfortunately a negative trigger. And then the news reports, unfortunately can be negative for sure, just with what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. So thinking of where those triggers are coming from, and when you recognize where those triggers are coming from, that can give you a good first step to take a direction. So if you realize, okay, I know a lot of my negative thoughts are coming from watching the news, and all it is negative, turn off the news, for a couple of days, take a step back from the TV, especially if you're not getting anything positive from it, there's no point in having it in your life that day. I understand that sometimes being a part of the news and obviously wanting to know what's going on a daily basis is important. However, there are a lot of other ways to get that information too that might be less of a negative trigger for you, whether it's a newspaper, social media, watching the news, learning it from, a close friend who maybe watches the news, where you don't have to have kind of that visual aspect too. There's so many different ways maybe you could go about it. And that's just one kind of example of how we could take one of those triggers out or change that trigger per se. So now I kind of want you to flip it around and take a look from that positive side. So what are some positive triggers for you? What do you feel like are situations, people, aspects of where that positive self-talk comes from, where you can say, I am smart enough, or I have this positive characteristic. I know I am great, whatever it may be. What are some examples of maybe where those stem from or where you find they're created from?
Miranda, if I may keep us negative for just 1 second, because there's one that
Sure.
came through that's important. A person wrote alcohol.
Okay. Definitely. So with that, will you repeat that, Katie? I don't know if I heard the whole thing.
Just to keep it negative, a person did write alcohol as a negative trigger, and I just wanted to bring that up because it's important.
Yeah, definitely. So that is definitely one too, that once you recognize where that trigger is coming from, you can take that further step. And there are so many different steps and directions to take, specifically with that one. A lot of different resources, finding good support groups, utilizing those community resources around you, having close family and friends as your support group. I don't know if there's anything in particular, Katie, that you guys have for like the senior services as a resource, but that would be something that members obviously could reach out to as well. On that topic as well with like alcohol or drug abuse as well, I always encourage members to reach out to their insurance companies. Many different insurance companies have different resources available for their members, or they can help kind of act as a liaison to help you find those support groups and find, places that are covered, or just kind of help you along your journey too. So no, that's a great one for sure. Awesome. So then kind of going back to the positive self-talk, the positive triggers there. Anybody have any examples of maybe where those come from for you? As you guys
I've got a couple here.
Oh, you got a couple already? Perfect.
Yep. We have people smiles, making point of talking to friends, makes me feel better knowing that I matter to other people.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, those are really great so far. So knowing that you have good support group around you, they always say, and I'm sure you've heard this phrase of, I'm probably not going to say it correctly, but kind of you are the sum of, your closest 5 people or something like that. So surrounding yourself with positive people, positive thoughts, people who build you up is very, very important, not only for yourselves, but for them as well. It's good to have somebody positive for them to feed off of. So that's great. So having good support system. I was going to say, while you guys were writing down, one of my biggest positive triggers is my mom. No matter what I say about myself or about a situation, she always has a good positive spin to kind of just bring it back into perspective, and it's always good and important to have that. Again, with other aspects of positivity, finding things that maybe you had done in the past that you're able to incorporate again. So I know a lot of people in my conversations with my members, positivity for them comes from different activities, different social engagements. And I know with the social engagements at this point might be a little bit different than the past. A lot of things are more virtual, but they are still available. So if you're able to get a hold of those things even on a virtual basis, it's better than not having them at all. So I encourage, you guys to maybe reach out and find, a local club that's, turned to more online or more virtual video. It still is definitely better than not having that for sure. Okay. So if from what our examples have shown, if you guys have noticed, is probably we need to refocus. For a lot of us, when we go through that exercise, we realize that we might be falling within that category of the 3/4 of what we're saying. We can only write down negative thoughts. We only thought of negative triggers. It was kind of difficult to think of positive. If you're on the flip side of that, that's awesome. Keep going, keep up the good work. That is really, really great to be up there. And if not, we can all get there. Switching those thoughts to more positive and learning how to have that refocus is going to be huge for us. So one of my favorite phrases or kind of thing that I have in this presentation here, it's a little bit vulgar to the voices inside your head, but we're allowed to talk to them like that, is tell the negative committee that meets inside your head to sit down and shut up. We don't want to hear from them. We want to hear from the positive committee. So positivity leads to increased confidence, more self-worth, positive self-esteem, more happiness, something that we've kind of focused on and definitely touched on throughout the presentation. So I hope that looking into your motivations, why this presentation was important or why self-talk was interesting to you keeps you able to put this into place and really kind of helps you to focus on utilizing and trying to practice this on a daily basis. So a couple of just aspects of wanting to refocus. So we want to be optimistic. We also want to be realistic. We have an objective that we want to accomplish with being more positive, is having those more positive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors around it. A couple of the different things with having that refocus is we do want to focus on the present. A lot of the times when we bring up the past, it's for that comparison aspect. And I don't know if you've heard the phrase of comparison is a stealer of joy. Comparison in many, many ways can bring us into that negative, not in the positive. So if we focus on the present and the right here and now, we tend to have a more positive or better outlook for the future as well. We want to assess problems that we have, not as problems per se, but more as challenges. Challenges don't have to be negative. Challenges are things that make us stronger, that put us through a learning process, that teach us something about ourselves and about the world around us. So, when we think of them more as challenges and not as problems, they're less of a threat. It's not something that's scary. It's something that we're kind of more motivated or excited to accomplish. Failures are building blocks. That's something that I had heard during the making of the presentation when I was kind of looking just through self-talk and kind of what some examples are. So using our failures not as negative, but using them as positive. You learn something from when maybe you don't do something correctly. It's again a learning process, and we can keep building on that until we can get to that success. Refocusing on the aspect of successes can be repeated. Success isn't usually a one and done thing. We have successes many times at many different aspects of life in many different situations. And one of my biggest motivators or things that I think of is the one on the bottom here of performance, and how that does not equal your self-worth. And that's something that takes a little while to grasp or to kind of have that self-realization on, is the aspect of just because maybe you don't do something to par or don't accomplish something as well as you thought you would, that doesn't mean that that equates to your self-worth. That doesn't mean that you're not worthy of whatever it is that the subject may be. So that's something, if you want to kind of take that back and apply it into maybe some different situations in your life and realize that, just because you didn't accomplish something well doesn't mean that you yourself have bad characteristics associated with that. Okay, so our brains are very powerful. We could do a whole presentation just on brains and how powerful we are and what we can do with them. But we want to make sure that we can take responsibility for the thoughts that we have and the actions that we react and kind of put in our life. We are in control of those things, as in we're in control of our actions, our thoughts, and our reactions. So everything that comes from that thought cycle is something that we are responsible for and that we are in control of, which is a good thing. That means that we can aim them down a negative or a positive road. A couple more encouraging, motivating statements or things like that. I think that these can be very helpful too if it's something that you find is helpful for you. I always encourage members to keep their favorite quote or inspirational saying or something like that close to them. So whether it be the background on your phone, if you utilize like the bathroom mirror is huge. I mean, we're usually at our bathroom multiple times a day. So if you have a powerful statement, you can write it down on a piece of paper, make it on a fancy piece of paper, stick it up on your bathroom mirror or something like that, so you can see it every day just to keep it up as a reminder. So be careful how you're talking to yourself, because you're listening. is a good one. Whether, again, it's that silent or out loud aspect, we're still hearing ourselves. And then something I know probably everybody has heard is whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So again, pushing towards that aspect of we want to think that we can, because we're definitely more likely to do so. We have those positive thoughts, feelings, and outcomes with that. All right, so this technique here, it's called the SOS technique, is helping to stop that negative self-talk and help shift it into that positive. So SOS stands for stop, observe, and shift. And it does take some practice, again, which we talked about, building stronger muscles, having a good foundation. We want to make sure that we are practicing these things on more than just an occasion. This isn't a once a year holiday, unfortunately. We want to give ourselves a good basis to stand on. So the first thing we want to do is stop. So when those negative thoughts come in, or you recognize yourself talking to yourself in a negative manner, you mentally want to tell yourself to stop. And that's either mentally, or you can do that out loud as well. I've done this before, where I physically stop moving, I say stop, I recognize what's happening. And then you want to give yourself the opportunity to address that thought and interrupt that thought cycle. So you want to say, stop, where is this coming from? What's triggering this? That in itself is interrupting that cycle. Now, how can I shift this? So you're going to take that stop process, you're going to observe. So again, observe what you're saying to yourself, how it's making you feel, what emotions are coming up. And then we're going to shift. So we're going to shift that cognitive, emotional, or behavioral response and use those positive coping skills and positive techniques that we've kind of utilized today. Where is this trigger coming from? Why is it making me feel like this? How can I get that and turn that into more of that positive response or positive self-talk that I want to see? And if it isn't something I've said enough today, we want positivity. It's something that we definitely have chatted about. And I hope it comes across that that's kind of that end goal for you. So turning negative phrases into a positive phrase. So a lot of the statements that we've seen, even some that you guys have used in your examples, were coming from I am, or I know, I accept, and we want to use the different types of positive self-talk we've looked at in the presentation. So thinking of those motivators or encouragers, the proclaimer, the realist, some of those different examples that we had. I want you to just a second and think back to one of those maybe negative phrases that you had utilized. So the one offhand I know somebody had given an example of was, I am not smart enough. So I want you guys to take just a minute and give an example of how you turned that negative self-talk into positive self-talk. So one of the things that I have utilized, or something that came up a lot for me, was coming from a lot of, unfortunately, sometimes children are very mean when we grow up in schools. It's hard to control kind of what they're saying, how we feel, and how we react. And I was very bullied for quite a while. So a lot of those negative statements were part of my everyday life. And the one that came across a lot was due to physical, how you look, and how you feel. And so, I grew up most of my life with, I am overweight, I am not good enough, I am, all of those things would come across quite frequently. So, as I've kind of gone through the self-talk aspect and really kind of looked at my own aspects, using statements of I am beautiful, or I am good enough, or I am strong, or I am, motivated. There's so many different things that you can use there. So anybody have any good examples of maybe what your negative self-talk is and maybe what some positive self-talk you can utilize instead?
Nothing has come through yet, but we can give it a couple seconds.
Yeah, that's okay. Honestly, it takes, usually during the presentation, I give a good 2 to 3 minutes for this one, because we're so conditioned, unfortunately, to that negativity. It's very difficult for us to, sit down and say, even if it's just in writing to say something positive about ourselves, or figure out how do we make this into a positive statement. So that's one of the main goals that I would encourage you to have is, kind of take the small exercises that we've done today, do those every once in a while, really kind of put that into perspective for yourself. And even just having a list of positive phrases that you can repeat to yourself on a daily basis is super helpful. I know, which sounds maybe silly at first, but definitely can be very, very helpful.
We have a comment that came through. It says, my thinking is fear, so when false evidence is appearing real.
Okay. So fear definitely is, and unfortunately falls onto that, that negative self-talk, where things that are happening, which mostly are not real, or that false aspect, or pushes us to feel a certain way. So taking that and using those phrases of, even the I am statements of, I am strong, I am confident, I can, and then add that positive aspect depending on whatever situation it is that's provoking that fear. Putting the I can tackle this, whatever it may be. So one of, I guess, the good things, or ones that came through earlier, was the I can make it through this COVID isolation, or something related to that, just putting that statement on there, that very positive, firm statement, that in itself can really help to evoke those positive emotions. All right, so I'm going to move on. So this is something that I definitely encourage you guys to do, even if you have a couple minutes after the presentation, to put a little bit more focus on it and really kind of sit down and really think about, let me take some of those negatives, really just write them as positives, so I have something to go to, so I know and I'm prepared with what I can say to myself when that negative situation comes up. So we want to identify where this negative is coming from. Again, kind of look at those triggers. We want to identify how can I change those to positives. We want to try and use these daily. It's really something that with most things, we need to form it into a habit, and that just takes repetition and consistency. Just like if you were changing your eating habits, if you were trying to exercise more often, it's the same thing, when it comes to having this self-talk goal. So a habit, or how you can help make it into a habit, is trying to repeat those positive words and phrases that you have created over and over. And just like we do with the negative, when we believe the negative, we finally start to believe the positive as well. And we start to see that thought cycle come into play and have more of those positive reactions and outcomes to it. I threw another phrase in here as well, or another kind of photo. And this one is one that helps to put it into perspective a little bit. When you have a negative statement come into mind, is that something that you would say to somebody else? Is that something you would say to your sister or your mother or your grandchild, or, whoever it is? Would you say that? And if not, why are we saying it to ourselves? It's hard to think about, but so I encourage you guys to talk to yourself like you would talk to somebody that you love, or keep that kind of in your mind as well as you're going through this. So I know I mentioned we were going to go through mantra or intentions as well. So a mantra was originally a word in Hinduism and Buddhism that was kind of like a sound that was repeated to aid in concentration or meditation. You might think of the Om sound as one of those. So this can be also like a statement or a slogan that you repeat frequently. Mantra actually comes from the two words that you see here broken up, and it means mind and transport or vehicle. So this is something that's meant to transport your mind somewhere. Again, it can be negative or positive, but the idea behind a mantra or intention is positivity. So these are very simple statements or phrases, very powerful statements or phrases. They focus on the healing and energizing process, and again, are focused more on the positivity. So one that comes into my household frequently, one that my mom and I talk about quite a lot, is I am worthy. It's a very clear, well-defined, simple statement. You know what it means. You kind of feel that power coming from it, or that's something that you know maybe used to be a negative that you're turning into that positive. So, for the person who had sent the aspect of not being smart enough, all you just need to put is I am smart or intelligent, I am brilliant. Those sort of things really are powerful statements. They don't need to be long-winded, it doesn't need to be anything lengthy, but something that and you can just repeat on a morning basis, day-to-day basis. That's something you can have hanging up in your bathroom mirror, whatever it may be that works for you well. I have a member that actually carries around their phrase in their wallet because they always have their wallet on them. So every time they kind of open up their wallet, they see it there, something that just helps them to keep it as a priority. So one of the things I will leave you guys with is you can't live a positive life with a negative mind. Kind of the whole overview of what we're trying to do here is to change those negative statements into positive statements that in turn can really help to create that more positive outlook for us. We're on a happier basis. We like to do more things, be involved, learn more things, have so many other opportunities, than maybe if we were surrounding ourselves with just strictly negative things. So in conclusion, some of the things that we talked about is our thoughts drive our emotions and our actions. Our self-talk is controllable, which is awesome. It's something that we definitely can take responsibility for and change. What we need to do is just identify our triggers, where that self-talk is coming from, use that SOS or that stop, observe, and shift method when needed. I really encourage you guys to try and do that at some point today. Try at least once a day to really take a step back and realize how much we're talking to ourselves on a day-to-day basis. I also encourage you guys to set a mantra or intention for yourself that you can use daily. Again, it can range, to anything that really is applicable to you. And then practice. I know it sounds very simple just to say practice, but really setting aside some time to focus on that, just like you would set aside time to exercise, to cook dinner, whatever it may be, even if it's just a solid 5 minutes a day, can be very, very helpful. You'll start to notice with time, throughout the next weeks and so, that your mindset will shift, your perspective will shift. You will maybe have some more positive emotions than those negatives. And that with practice and consistency, those things can be more long lasting. All right, Katie, any questions that might be coming in that you guys can think of just related to the self-talk, kind of how to put that in your everyday life? If you guys want to, you can use that Q&A section to type in some questions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Miranda. I'm seeing a couple questions here. The first one, sorry, I'm echoing. What to do about family members we can't avoid? The negative triggers, I think.
Yes. So a couple of different things that you can do in those sort of situations is coming more from the preparation aspect. If you know that you're going into a situation that may make you uncomfortable or that may have that family member in it that you unfortunately can't avoid, because that definitely does happen, is you can just be more mentally prepared for that situation. So you can build yourself up that day. You can make sure that you are kind of filled with positivity to the brim. I know a lot of aspects of if you're able to still just bring positivity to the situation, despite whatever that other family member is doing, that helps you in the interior, not even anybody. Well, it also probably helps other people too, but definitely helps yourself to get through that situation. So being more mentally prepared in that aspect.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I'm seeing a couple comments here. Love all these quotes, which I do too. This presentation has been so comfortably positive. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You're so welcome. I'm so glad you could join us. We all definitely need.
I know. And like you're saying, it's definitely something to practice. I'm seeing no questions, but this really gives you a lot to think about. Very helpful.
Awesome.
And this was great. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys again so much for not only just taking the time out of your day, but really kind of putting the effort into looking into your own life with it. I know it's very challenging sometimes not to just sit and learn about, a presentation, but when it really directly applies to you and how can I really take this back and put it into my everyday life, it really does show your effort there, and motivation to do so. So that's really awesome. So I really encourage you guys, if you do have any follow-up questions or anything, please feel free, let us know. And again, it's something that does take practice and it does take time, just like with anything else. So, don't give up on yourself, don't let it overwhelm you or frustrate you, definitely continue on and keep giving it that effort for sure.
I agree. And we have more thank yous. Definitely food for thought is a comment. So Miranda, thank you so much for your time. And I will say that if you are struggling with anything emotionally, mentally, even physically, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Senior Services. We can talk with you about supports and services, whatever that looks like. Be person-centered to make sure that you are living a good quality of life. Especially now, we know that's even more important, even though it always has been, but it's at the forefront for sure. And our number again is 858-8526. So with that, I think we will close. Miranda, thank you for the millionth time, and everybody who's here, thank you so much.
Thank you guys again. Thank you, Katie, as well, for having me.
Always.